Well, hello world and hello Twitch. Hi, I'm Tim Bray. I'm an engineer at Amazon, and we're coming to you with today's installation of our series on messaging technologies, designed to talk about the fact that AWS has at least 6 different messaging services, and it's reasonable to ask which one would be the right one for you, and that the purpose of this is to explore that. So I have with me today Georgie Matthews, and we're coming live from Vancouver. And I could prove that, except for this usually overloads the camera. Let's see. Can the camera show?
Too bright. Too
many photons. Well, trust me, there's mountains and Carver and buildings and so on out there. Okay. Now we'll let the camera recover for a second. Okay, so the subject of the official title of today's session is Messaging for Real-Time User Engagement. And Pinpoint does a lot more than just shuffle messages around. It is a platform specifically aimed for messaging from businesses to people. Now, normally at this point, I introduce what the product does and give a brief overview, except for in this case, I'm not going to because I've never used it myself. And so I don't bring much expertise to the table. So, Georgie, tell us about it.
Hey, Tim. And a very good morning to all of you guys listening. I'm Georgie Matthews. I'm from the Amazon Pinpoint team, as I mentioned.
That's not quite good enough. What do you actually do at the Amazon Pinpoint team?
So at Amazon Pinpoint, so what is Pinpoint? Pinpoint is AWS's service for user engagement and to drive effective user engagement. What is user engagement? Think about any user touch point that you're driving a message so that you can re-engage users. These could be messages across email, SMS, push, but think about that. You have transactional use cases, you have targeted marketing use cases. What are these? You could have use cases such as order confirmations, transaction alerts, which are pure transactional in nature and sent to a specific user. Or you could have targeted marketing messages such as camp flash sales and brand awareness messages. What Pinpoint enables it enables a single application layer to fulfill all these use cases, and also adds on top of it by bringing in analytics and be able to track effectiveness for each of these messages using the analytics on user behavior. Because that's what you're sending these messages for. You're sending these messages to your users to be able to influence their user behavior so that you can get them back, get them re-engaged, build brand equity, and also resulting in greater loyalty and greater revenue.
Great. Now, you still dodge my question there. What's your actual role over there at Pinpoint?
Oh, great. Forgot about that. I'm the product lead on Pinpoint.
Okay, so you're the person who really knows everything. So people out there, if you have any deep, hard questions about what it is and what it does, this would be the guy to ask. I noticed somebody already asked whether it can target... Oh, there's even an answer. Yes, it can target browser push notifications. That was from the JRock. Thanks, the JRock. Okay, so when you described that, it sounded maybe a little bit like SNS, because a simple notification service, which is also in the business of sending emails and pushing to mobile and some other stuff too. So what are the big differences?
I think the biggest difference is our focus on the end user messaging use cases. I think the focus is on, and we believe that it is an area or subject area vertical that we can offer not just the transport layer. So SNS is great if you want to offer reliable, scalable messages from a transport layer standpoint. So push, SMS messages. But how do you get a single service layer for not just push and SMS messages, but for email, and also be able to have up the stack additional functionality where you can bring in the effectiveness score, and also bring in functionality like how is that impacting your users? And also think about all the other things that you have to do on top of that for truly building a messaging system for end user engagement. You have to have a targeting system. You have to have a scheduler system. And you also have to build a system to choreograph and orchestrate all of this. Pinpoint gives you that out of the box.
Cool.
The other big thing, Tim, is that Pinpoint focuses on one key thing is Pinpoint focuses on one additional persona, the marketer. Uh-huh. So the reason why I mentioned that,
I got to say that's new at AWS.
Yes,
we see
yes,
our audience as pretty well 100% geek.
And I know the audience here will be mostly developers, but hey, if you have marketers out there, definitely reach out and evangelize Pinpoint for us, because that's the focus here. So why it is different? when we started building Pinpoint, we said, who are the people creating these end user messages? So if you, I know you guys can see my screen. So one of the reasons was we believe that repeat users will mostly be the marketers. It's not, we want to empower you developers to set Pinpoint up, leave it to your marketing team saying, go figure out the tough problem on engaging the users.
So hold on a second. You're saying that a user of Pinpoint would actually go on using the console even after they've been using it for months? Or?
Absolutely. I think people will come back to the console to see effectiveness of their campaigns. So I have 1 million plus targetable users. I'm sending out all of them on a mobile push, and I'm sending out around 29 million push messages in the last 30 days.
That really is different because your average, AWS user, being a developer, uses the console to learn about it and then never goes back there. So that's really different.
Yeah.
So I hear you're getting some traction in the streaming media market.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so tell us about that.
I think we are getting a lot of traction from Hulu, Amazon Music, and the reason why we're getting it, Tim, is these customers want to engage. Content's changing. There's a lot of content out there, and it's all about getting the right content to the right users and getting them aware, saying, hey, there's this content that's coming up. So with Hulu and Amazon Music, they want to spread awareness as they have new content popping up when there are live events happening. Go ahead, Tim.
So 2 questions. So the JRock asks, do you have ordering guarantees on your messages? I think probably not.
When we say ordering guarantees, like,
Step in closer here.
I'm sorry.
Does that mean you guarantee that they show up in the same order they're sent?
So we do have a priority where you can have campaign caps on a daily basis. So it's not, what we want to guarantee for a customer is the sequence of sending. Absolutely. We do enable that. And also, we also have additional guarantees on how quickly you want to fan out a campaign. So you can throttle a campaign where you could say fan out a urgent message at, say, within 10 seconds. I'm sorry, that's me. Give me 1 sec, guys.
There you go.
All right, coming back to the question. So you could have priorities where you could have use cases where you have an urgent message and you want to send a message out in, say, within 10 seconds. And you can set a queue up, and if you set up a time to live for 10 seconds, any message beyond 10 seconds will not be sent out. This is great for a flash sale use case. Also, we have some, on the mobile scenario, because of the TPS at which we fan out around 1 million push messages per minute. We've had scenarios where customers have said, can you throttle it? Because it's a DDoS scenario. So the customers, in this case, was Amazon Music was, hey, you're sending it too fast. Mm-hmm. And was, can you throttle it? So you can actually also specify what is the time to execution. Say, send out a campaign to 1 million plus users spread over a time period of an hour.
Okay, so Amazon Music and Hulu you mentioned. Maybe a few words on what they're doing.
So Hulu, in their use case, are trying to drive traffic to the Hulu Live app, where they want to be able to, as live contents are being streamed, they want to be able to increase awareness for that live content. One of the use cases was March Madness. And as March Madness events were happening, they were streaming in or sending notifications to customers that, hey, there's a live March Madness event happening right now. And how they're doing this is they have first enabled the Pinpoint integration via SDK to capture all of the events and enable updation of all of the endpoints. And endpoints and Pinpoint are destination addresses. So that the SDK captures that and does that out of the box, capturing events and managing your endpoints. Then they have a database system where they have user behavior data. They can capture and segment that data from Pinpoint and build segments on Pinpoint via import. So let me show you an example how a customer would do it. So here, if you look at the console here, you can import a segment via an S3 link. So all you need to provide is an S3 link, and you can import a segment via a CSV or a JSON. So what this enables, Tim, is a scenario.
Sorry, what's in the segment?
A segment could be a set of users, like all users who
Oh, it's users, basically.
Users, right? Okay, these are users you want to reach out. And let me talk about Amazon Music. A good example for them is, are they all Prime customers? And this data is not coming from the app, but from a central database system.
I see. Okay.
And for the Hulu use case, interesting use case could be, are they seeing content on the TV? And again, that the TV analytics may not be on the Pinpoint system, and could be a segment that you're building from segmentation logic that you have outside of Pinpoint.
I see. Okay. So these are the tools that marketers, this is the language they speak.
Exactly.
That's right.
And here's the reason why, right? Marketers want to be able to micro-segment and micro-target users to be the most relevant. Think about all the messages you get today. You wake up, your inbox is filled with 60 plus emails. Which emails do you open? The emails that you feel that are personalized to you, that's showing content that's relevant to you. On the phone, you get hundreds of push notifications. You either will go unsubscribe to the push notifications, or you end up just saying, I'm not going to look at it. Or you just uninstall the app. And as an app developer,
one thing that really does irritate me is like when I buy something and I get like an email and an SMS and a push message or something like that.
Exactly, and that's why the charter for the Pinpoint team is, how do you start thinking about all of these messaging solutions as a single platform? And the learning, the reason why that happens, Tim, let me go into that, is today a lot of the customers that I talk to have different systems. They all read from the order confirmation system and order delivery system, but each of those are different systems that are managed by different teams. And the reason, when we drilled further in, what we learned was, it's because the teams had different expertise, and the teams never had a single service layer. So from a developer standpoint, that's when we started off with, hey, this has to be a simplified service layer for you to be able to engage a customer and create scenarios. So one reason, as we went through the Hulu use case, and was sending users messages, not to an email ID, not to a SMS number, not to a push token, but sending a message to a user, and based on your scenario, based on their preferences, having the message payload change.
You were going to do some deep dive on how that works?
Absolutely. So one example here would be, if you, okay, give me one sec. Yeah, right here. So if you look at this screen here, this is a definition of the endpoint ID here. In an endpoint ID, you could have the channel type, you could have the address, which could be an email address, which could be a phone number or a token. An endpoint can be enriched by different attributes. So what are the specific attributes that you could segment, your marketers will segment on? And then you could define the channel type. So here you see all the channel types that are supported on Pinpoint. You have APNS, APNS Sandbox, VoIP, and SMS and email.
What's APNS? I have no idea.
Apple Push Notification Services.
Okay.
Great question. So now, if you go further down, and this is where the marketing team, you really are empowering the marketing teams, is you now have a concept of a user ID. You can enrich each endpoint with a user ID. And when you're enriching with the user ID, this is what will be in a CRM system. So a customer relationship or record management system will have uniquely track each user in your system based on their unique user ID. They're not tracking based on their email ID. They're not tracking based on their SMS number, but they're tracking based on the user ID. Now, if you now take the story forward, what is a user's profile built on? It's built on this user ID. So now you are empowering your marketers to be able to send those messages to customers based on the user ID, and that's where we now have functionality where, Tim, remember I showed you the import segment functionality? Mm-hmm. You can actually just import a list of user IDs.
I see. Okay.
You don't even have to worry about importing a list of endpoints. You just can list and this as an import file here could be just a list of user IDs.
And it'll fill in the rest of the stuff?
Absolutely. Pinpoint will take care of what is the endpoints mapped to the users. Mm-hmm. And we will then send the messages out to each of the addresses. And then it totally depends on the message payload that you're specifying and giving to us.
So in the case of Hulu or Amazon Music, either one, tell us where they were coming from and how they got into Pinpoint. What made it the right choice for what they were trying to do?
So let me, the Hulu discussion started off first with, hey, we have this messaging, we are building this new app, and we have this messaging scenarios that we want to enable our marketing team and empower our marketing to build. And the scenario was, we want to ensure maximum content viewership for live content as content is getting live. So there are two business objectives. One was spreading awareness, and two, increasing viewership. I think Amazon Music similarly has Their business objectives was increasing retention, upsell to Prime, unlimited, and 3 was absolutely increasing listener time. So how often people are listening to music content. And this keeps happening to me.
Oh, we should have set out to not go to sleep, but that's okay.
It should. So Tim, you are an expert at doing this quite often. This is my first time. So now let's go further, right? One of the so that was the business objective, and then they said they came to the AM on the team, said, does AWS solve for these messaging scenarios? And we said the account management team reached out to the product teams and said, all right, what are the options available? One of the Tim, you mentioned about SNS. One of the services they were evaluating was SNS, but once you started building the architecture diagram, we clearly saw there was a scheduler block that was built on Lambdas. There was a targeting block that was built based on their own integrating their database system, and they also did not have any.
Just keeping it away. That's okay.
So they did not have any analytics. That was the big pain point that came back was. Yes, we can build the scheduler block, we can build the targeting block, but what about the analytics? And the analytics was really important for their marketing teams to track effectiveness of their messaging. They could have definitely done something in terms of using their analytics, existing application analytics, but they preferred something out of the box. And then when we started talking about Pinpoint, what they were really happy with was a lot of these components were out of the box. They did not have to worry about building it. They did not have to worry about scaling it because it was a managed solution. And the reason why they actually converted was the fact that the marketers could actually come, create segments they want, create campaigns they wanted to create, and be able to have that experience that they are controlling their end user experience.
Okay. So how did it go? I mean, once they decided to do it, how long did it take, and how much work was it to get on the air? Let's talk about Hulu, for example.
Yeah, I think for Hulu it took around 2+ months, and it was primarily for all the changes on the app and integrations with the database systems.
Oh, so they hooked it onto their existing app.
Exactly.
Right.
And as they were thinking about, and this was about, they were building a net new app, they were scaling it up, but they also had to hook to the existing database systems. Okay. So that was the work they were doing, and the interesting piece was this was a large enterprise that actually did this all by themselves. Oh,
so did they get any ProServe or SA help or anything like that?
They had an account manager, and they have account management help, and then they also definitely had a lot of the product inputs.
Okay, so that's one piece of evidence that this is pretty easy to set up, I guess.
Absolutely, and I think...
I mean, what I'm impressed with is hooking up the database, because that's always the hard part, is getting the database hooked up.
Absolutely, and getting the data normalized, and also having an interesting piece is having a common normalized output method too. Because of the way Pinpoint normalizes data across SMS, all of the engagement channels, you now have a normalized data stream for analyzing all engagement on your database, on ingesting data back into your database, which if you talk to customers who have multiple point solutions, that is a data normalization becomes an ongoing operational overhead.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Data normalization is always a pain in the butt.
Absolutely.
Right? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So what did we learn? I mean, what lessons would we take away from that engagement that we could share with people out there?
I think, so I actually gave away some of the secret earlier. I think the biggest learning was marketers don't think about these as messaging channels. They think about engaging their user. And they think about driving that single user back into their services, and they really want to bring them and engage the user. I think one of the biggest learnings for Pinpoint as a service team was we need to start thinking about that user. And that's when, as part of this engagement, we added a functionality called send user messages. I did talk about this earlier, but send user messages, again, just relies on the user ID, and you can send a message to any user based on just their user ID. The other learning that we had was the importance of how you think about message failovers, how you think about analytics and dashboarding for marketers. So simplicity for the console, I think we've, through all our engagements with marketers, what we've learned is marketers can come up with really creative ways to target users. And we are learning on an ongoing basis, hey, we can add more functionality to Pinpoint to enable those marketers. And that's something that we it's been a strong hypothesis of ours that the console will be extremely important for the service, and that's been validated over and over by these engagements.
Okay. So I don't know how much you can talk about numbers, but Hulu's a pretty big outfit, right? I mean, what's a lot of messages? I mean, what would be a lot of users?
I think this was a public statement. I think Hulu has up to over 20 million users out there, and they send out. I don't know. I don't have the exact number of the messaging volume, but overall, like the Pinpoint system, right, and the underlying systems underneath Pinpoint handle billions of messages on a daily basis.
In general, cloud stuff can do that. You know, that's
the scale and reliability. We were talking about this earlier, right? Scale and reliability is what cloud's been always. AWS especially has invested significantly in that scale and reliability component.
Okay, so now on this series, we like source code. We want to see some actual stuff that actually touches the technology. Now, I understand that in this service, you know, that's maybe not the most interesting piece. It's the marketing, but you got to show us some source code.
Hey, I thought I'll get a pass here.
No.
I said my persona is a marketer. Come on.
I know you've got a tab there with source code in it.
All right, so here's one of the demo that one of our SAs on the team built out. And the demo basically analyzes your Cognito. If you're using Cognito to manage your users, assumes that you're using Cognito with the Twitter integration that Cognito has. Once you have that Twitter information, it actually scans Twitter for sentiments for a brand or to a brand handle that any tweet to a brand handle. It analyzes the sentiment based on who the creator of the tweet was, and then based on Lambda logic, executes Pinpoint campaigns to actually re-engage those customers.
So the whole thing's pretty serverless.
It is, absolutely. At the center of it is two pieces, right? A Pinpoint Lambda as a serverless model there, and then Pinpoint as an outbound messaging service, as well as the analytics service that brings in all the analytics data.
So you're going through Kinesis to Lambda to Pinpoint, and then also to Firehose into Elasticsearch.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I think that's enabled where you can have Pinpoint has that out of the box, where you have that Kinesis and Firehose support for all real-time streaming of data. So a lot of the failover scenarios that we talked about, Tim, was how do you prevent a customer from sending not an email, a push, and an SMS for the same order delivery? That's a scenario where you could have a real-time stream saying, if first send a push message, if the customer engaged on it, then actually you could have an action that, hey, here's my SMS message.
Well, I got to say, there's some design idioms on that slide that I'm seeing more and more and more. You know, for things that are not compute heavy, that the serverless really, you know, is becoming the obvious way forward. And you know, using Kinesis to send one stream to your actual runtime logic and another stream for archival, I see that a lot these days.
And I think from an application analytics standpoint, I also see this as a pattern for alarming operational metrics. So one of the elements of Pinpoint, I know this is a messaging series, but I'm going to put a shameless plug on analytics, which is also a pivot of Pinpoint, is we have one of the customers we have is Chime, who Amazon Chime is AWS's messaging service for conferencing. Chime uses us for operational analytics. What they do is they stream operational events, and on a Lambda they have for alarming on any CloudWatch event, on CloudWatch metrics, they run that Lambda.
Okay.
And that helps a lot of the scenarios where you want to tackle operational metrics, and Kinesis then, the fact that you're using streams and then a Lambda on the stream then allows you to split up operational metrics and your engagement metrics, and you can have two sources for that.
I didn't quite get the Twitter connection there.
All right, to the Twitter connection is for a customer. Think about them as having a login handle. Mm-hmm. They can go saying, hey, actually, I'll give you a real time. If United has off late have been having a lot of issues with the service customer quality, right? Customers have gone and put a lot of negative comments on the United Twitter handle saying, hey, this is a negative experience. If this system was in place for them, what they could have done was they could have read that negative sentiment, identified which customer was sending that, if they have them registering their account using their Twitter handle on United, and then send a message to them to say, hey, sorry for that experience. And the intent here is you want to capture real-time scenarios of how customers are reacting with your brand, and then be able to influence messaging sent to them via email, push, and so not send a promotional message to them when they have had a negative experience.
Okay, cool.
Exactly.
So that's an architecture diagram, but
Yep.
it's still not code.
Absolutely. So actually, one last thing we missed out here.
Oh, yeah?
How are we getting the sentiment? We're getting the sentiment from Amazon Comprehend on the top right here.
Uh-huh.
So you capture the Twitter messages and then you send it to Comprehend to figure out whether it's a negative sentiment or not. So I'm sorry I went back to this, but I just wanted to highlight
Sure, no
that here too. All right, now to code.
Oh, I see. So there's some more code there that's routing the Twitter capture to comprehend.
Absolutely.
Okay, got
So
it.
that's in the same Lambda, and you have the first, you get a response back from the Comprehend that, hey, it's a negative response. And then that negative response then results you to use your application ID and your address to now here you're invoking an APNS message. You're now saying, hey, sorry to hear that you had a bad experience.
Okay. Oh, now did they have to select APNS, or could they have just said, use what's best?
They could have just selected user ID
And said
this based on if you had an email address, and this message payload could have been updated to a GCM payload, or could also have been updated to an email or an SMS payload.
Although I would think that in most cases you would probably be less specific. You would just say send it to the user.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because you want to be a guarantee that you want to maintain that relationship. You want to make sure that the user receives it, and you may not have the preferences from them.
I see. Okay.
Yep. And once you have sent this message out, so here's the message body, and this is where we were talking about. You could have this message configuration as APNS message. So you see this here. Mm-hmm. You could also have an email message or an SMS message. And then once you have had that, you get the response back, and you can update the endpoint information with what was the response they have had. And last is you can do a closing ceremony with submitting an event. So you can actually say that, hey, I'm sorry here. You can say that you can process this and record an event into Pinpoint right here at the bottom of it. Yep.
Will you scroll up there a bit? Or?
That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, right here. So you can submit an event, and that can be the success that the event has been processed. So this, Tim, is a good example where you started off with an external queue, created a messaging workflow, created a dynamic messaging workflow across multiple channels, and then did a closing ceremony by sending an event and updating the endpoint with that information.
So even though you're focused on marketers, there still is a role for the developer here to build this kind of application.
Absolutely. Right. And this is where developers can innovate for the marketers. Mm-hmm. This is where I think a lot of the innovation and leveraging the building blocks that AWS is providing, I think we've got a lot of asks from customers that, hey, how does Pinpoint plug with AI/ML? And all the work we are doing on the prediction side, on the machine learning side, can this be, how do I know what is the best time to target? How do I know what is the best channel to target? Can I predict that? And that's where developers can do a lot of innovative stuff using Pinpoint.
Excellent. Well, I think we've got a pretty complete picture here. We've got a messaging service with that's also an application, I think.
Absolutely.
Because none of the other messaging services, I think, really have application semantics. They're basically about pushing bytes around in various ways. So
absolutely, I think this is from the messaging service side, this is our first time we are moving from just being an infrastructure service to actually offering more of a platform as a service and saying, hey, and again catering for the marketer.
Mm-hmm. So even though some of the actual mechanics are the same as SNS, it wouldn't really be hard to pick it. If you need to move hundreds of millions of things around with big fan out, SNS is the way to go. If you actually need to have analytics and have end-user focused delivery of stuff, Pinpoint seems like an obvious choice.
Absolutely. And especially if you want to kind of continue to refine that end-user and measure impact. Mm-hmm. I think that's where that Pinpoint value prop really hits home.
I see. Okay, great. Now let me just check and see if there are any other interesting questions. I think we got most of them. Okay. So I think we've seen a reasonably complete story. Thank you, everybody out there, for half an hour of your time. Now, next week, we're going to be back a week from today. I believe that's June 7th, with messaging for real-time analytics, which will be featuring Kinesis, something like really completely different. Although I noticed Kinesis was there in your architecture diagram. When we say we have 6 messaging services and which one you should pick, it often turns out to be which 2 or 3 you should pick to get the job done. That really shouldn't be surprising. So on that note, I think we'll say thank you to everybody, and we hope to see you again next week on the messaging service Twitch series, and thank you for coming out. Bye-bye.
Bye.